This is Focus on Your Health. It's brought to you by Kingman Regional Medical Center in historic Kingman, Arizona. This week on the program, my guest is Dr. Ken Jackson. He's board certified in family medicine, and his focus is obstetrics. And in his 50 years of practicing medicine, he's delivered some 5,000 babies. But who's counting? Some 6,000 babies.
I went back and tried to estimate it. And it came out that I probably delivered over 5,000 in Kingman.
Dr. Jackson, welcome.
Thank you.
And this week on the program, you've been a friend to the program for many years and to its humble host. This week on the program, we are going to wade into vaccines for the expectant mothers of the world, for the babies of the world, and for just about everyone. Now, I want to preface my remarks by saying that in 12 years of hosting this program, I have always avoided politics. Now and then somebody will spout off about politics, and I kind of get out of the way and steer it back. I want to talk about vaccines, not politics. Why are the two issues so conflated, Dr. Jackson?
There's always been some distrust over vaccines. There's always been a lot of, I can think of over the decades of things that have gone on that have become political, really, and different ideas that we're people of science. You look at the data and try to make the best decisions based on that. Sometime in developing vaccines, you don't have enough data, and we'll be getting to COVID, right? That's what really polarized everybody, more so. But it existed before, the distrust. And
we want to talk about measles this week because, of course, there's a measles outbreak going on here in the U.S.
And also, I read today there were 2 deaths from whooping cough, and that's another big deal with.
Yes.
That we'll get into.
Let's get into it. In 1998, a medical journal called, and of course this is not news to you, but in 1998, a medical journal called The Lancet published a study by Andrew Wakefield, who was then a doctor, who has since been defrocked or disbarred, whatever the term is for a doctor.
I believe they took his license and also threw him in jail.
Yeah. And basically, he had a tiny little sample size of 12 patients and kind of cooked the data to try to show a correlation between the MMR vaccine and autism. Is that the backstory right so far?
Yes, that and the fact that he had economic gain in it because he was then going to push a different measles or MMR vaccine, right?
Right.
And so it really did not look good for him.
When you look back on your career prior to that time period, was there suspicion around the MMR vaccine? Or was this something that began with that publication?
Yeah, I don't remember. I still get people today that I had a patient not that many years ago that was refusing to take Tdap, which is the immunization for whooping cough that we give all pregnant women or offer to them. And she quoted that guy. I said, that's been debunked. That guy's they put that guy in jail. I was just, and it came up again the next visit, and I was just reactive enough about it that I made her cry. And then she didn't come see me anymore. She got through the rest of the pregnancy seeing my partners. But that illustrates what we have to walk, that line between trying to get the patient to do what we think is the right thing, but not being so direct or heavy-handed or whatever that forces them away from us.
That study was debunked. The medical journal, The Lancet, issued a retraction. Medical community basically around the world said this is not factual, but it just shows you we're talking about something that happened 27 years ago, and people are still talking about it today. You and I are still talking about it today.
That's pretty discouraging.
Yeah.
But that's that sort of belief system, it keeps coming back. From what I remember as a little child getting the polio vaccine. And it started there. Where it really started was back with cowpox. And so it started back there, back in I think 1700s, and they were noticing that people that had cowpox were not getting killed with smallpox.
Mm-hmm.
And so they figured that out and did some stuff. And actually, I think the name vaccine comes from the word for cow.
Oh yeah,
and
vaca.
That vaca,
Yeah.
and that's how that happened. And so that's when it all started, and it's probably the most important thing that's happened to the world
in the
history of the world. If you think of all the things that those viruses could have done, that they were really stopped in their track, and then for most of the eradicate. I mean, you have to get herd immunity, and then you have to eradicate it. And so that's what happened to smallpox. It supposedly happened to polio, but I remember a couple of years ago they had some cases up in New York.
Yeah. Do you remember, so in 50 years of practicing medicine, do you remember early on seeing vaccine-preventable diseases that we don't see now?
Do I ever?
Such as?
Boy, back when I was practicing on the reservation, which I went to in 1976, they had not yet developed the vaccines for the bacteria. They had not developed the vaccine for pneumococcus, and they had not developed the vaccine for Haemophilus influenza. So we're seeing on the reservation, Haemophilus influenza, pneumonia, meningitis. There was sickness all over the place with little kids. Yeah. Can I tell you a quick story?
I love the stories.
Okay. This happened a couple years before that. I was in my internship. It's sort of related to vaccines and lack thereof. But I was an intern, and I was in a charity hospital in New Orleans, and I was in the pediatric emergency room. And this 17-year-old African-American girl brings in her 8-month-old toddler, and he's just not quite right. And I said, well, maybe I think we need to do a spinal tap on him. And she picked up the baby and left. So I went at noon, I went and told my my chief resident, I said, I don't feel very good about this baby. I mean, I was kind of sick, and I think I just scared her away when I told her we should do that. So he said, yeah, okay. So I worked the rest of the day. And then he comes to me at 5 o'clock and he says, there's a phone call for you. And I'd never got a phone call at Charity Hospital in my life. So I went and picked up the phone, and it was the CEO of the hospital. And he was traveling across the Mississippi River. And the first thing I said is how amazed I was that he had a phone in his car.
Yeah.
This is 1975.
Yeah.
And so...
Must have been $20 a minute.
Oh, gosh. But he said, I heard you may have a baby that got away. And I said, yeah. Yes, sir, I think so. So he says, well, there's going to be a couple of uniformed cops that are going to come by and pick you up. And I said, okay. And what turned out is that after I told the chief resident, that he'd spent the rest of the day getting a court order to go get that baby. Okay. And so the two policemen took me over there, and they wanted to just snatch the baby and go for it. But I said, well, let me, and the mother wouldn't talk to me, but the grandmother would. And so we got them to agree, and the mother and the baby came back to Charity Hospital, and the resident said, you do the tap, because we wanted to try to rule out meningitis. The only way I can make this work with the immunizations is for that disease, I did a spinal tap and pure pus came out. And it grew out Haemophilus influenza, of which we were maybe I don't know, 10 years away or something from having. I think that pneumococcal vaccine came out in the late 70s, and then H flu came out somewhere around there, later than there. But we were away from having that available to us, and so the whole story wouldn't have happened if that child would have been immunized, if we'd have had the immunization then. Same thing on the reservation. But
well, how did it work out for that child?
This baby, we admitted to the critical, the ICU, the neonatal ICU, and I went up and visited him every day for 2 weeks. The mother never acknowledged or no eye contact, never said a word to me. But the baby survived. As I say, this is not totally about immunizations. It was about my experience of really being in the middle of something. And sometimes those things only come by not very often in a lifetime for most of us practicing. Yeah. I've told you a couple other stories about things, but that one was, I didn't really know that much. I'd been there for like 2 weeks doing pediatric emergency room visits. But all that stuff that came through there, and the same thing I experienced on the reservation, ear infection after ear infection, pneumonias, and meningitis. Yeah. We had one baby come in once with a temperature of 108. That baby died. It had meningitis. Yeah. This baby got through it and got to go home. But it probably by the next morning it wouldn't have.
You said earlier about when you're talking with patients and with parents about vaccines, you mentioned kind of walking the line. Some of them are reluctant. In medicine, they call it vaccine hesitant. How do you approach that conversation? Not with someone who says, there's no way, I'm not going to do that, but with somebody who says, I don't know, there are a lot of stories, there's a lot of information out there, I don't know who to trust. How do you approach that conversation?
Well, after, the story I told you about the patient I made cry, that sunk in on me.
That maybe wasn't the best approach?
It wasn't. It was not. Well, it got me nuts. It didn't get anybody anything. She's not going to change. It's, like anti-vax. It's like a religion of its own. It's not like you can sit in and get an argument with somebody and change their mind. So you have to sort of try to approach. Like I'll give you the example of Tdap. The T is tetanus. And then the D is diphtheria, and the P is pertussis, which is for whooping cough. And that's recommended in pregnant women at 27 to 28 weeks. The reason it's given then is because the mother's immune response to that will peak in about 3 months, which is the time they're delivering, and that peak response the baby will be carrying. Protect it until it starts getting its own immunizations for that at 2 months. Most common time to get pertussis as a baby is 2 to 3 months of age. And so the discussion is, we actually did a little project. I had to do it for board recertification. I did it 3 or 4 years ago. And it was to see how successful we could be with getting Tdap. What I did is I made sure that we started giving them the information when they hit the door. We had little little flyers and nice blue picture on there about, very simple, just 3 or 4 points about it. And the national average was something in the mid-50s for the patients that would take that, even though it's so important. But we did that and progressed through that, and we got, I can remember this, I think we had 32 patients that we worked through, and 27 of them took the vaccine. So it was 85%. It was right up in there. And I think that's the whole, one of the thrusts of academia and of all these boards and all these, is that there's a way to alter those numbers. That number was something like 55 or 56%, and it dipped down to 53%. I don't know why I remember these numbers, but I do, when COVID came. So there became more distrust of all vaccines when what we struggled through COVID with.
But the key for doctors is to have the conversation.
It is to have it in a non-threatening manner. And I tell them all the same thing. I do that. I still do this today. Number one, we're talking about it, and I say, your baby will really thank you for this. And every one of them that comes in and has gotten the Tdap, I say, I love you for that. I've done that hundreds of times. Because I'm happy for them that they got the immunization.
Sure. For expectant mothers, is that the one immunization they need prior, or are there others?
That, we check, like we try to get them vaccinated with MMR. But those are things we cannot give in pregnancy. But we're aware of them. Like the MMR, we will aware of that, and we'll try to get them vaccinated right after they deliver.
Well, let's talk about MMR. Right now in the U.S., we have an outbreak of measles. Currently, there are active cases in 22 states at the time of our recording, not all tied to the same outbreak. But as you know, it's spreading in the Midwest and heading west. And
almost every single one of those children or adults was not immunized, correct?
Correct. And, elsewhere in the headlines, there have been some job cuts you might have heard about. Among them, more than 10,000 people with the Department of Health and Human Services. And I began our conversation by saying, I'm not going to get political. We want to share the good news. But I think it's important to share the landscape of what's going on. What I'm getting at is, additionally, Dr. Peter Marks, who was the top vaccine regulator for the FDA, as you know, has just resigned. And he said, it's become clear, this is a quote from Dr. Marks, it's become clear that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather that he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. Of course, the secretary he's speaking about is Robert Kennedy Jr. Again, what I'm getting at is this. Your job is only getting more difficult. And, meanwhile, we have this outbreak of the measles. What is the way forward?
Well, belief in science would help. That vulnerability or susceptibility to that disease, that's been brewing. So you can probably look at a lot of stuff that Kennedy Jr. says that I think is off the wall. But that part there, that's been, that all those people that got sick, that you can't blame it on.
No.
Yeah, you can't blame it on or point at an administration that's only been around for less than 3 months.
Right, and I guess that's my point. I'm certainly not trying to blame. This is a big, slow-moving train that's been in motion for quite a while.
Absolutely.
But the current backdrop doesn't help. I'm mixing my metaphors.
I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And you wonder, isn't it amazing the amount of traction that Wakefield's autism...
A specious study.
What did he do? Study 12 people?
12. It's nothing.
That's below nothing. You can't, and so that, I can't even believe someone would be stupid enough to try to do that and think he could get away with it. Look at what is created with that.
Yeah.
And you look at these, as I said, here comes whooping cough now.
Tell me about whooping cough.
It's pertussis. It's if you see a baby that's had it, you never forget it. They are about the most, and these are a little bit young, less than a year old. A lot of them, they get it. Again, the most vulnerable, or when they get to, most of them that get it, there's between 2 and 3 months of age. And you see one of those in the hospital, and they're there. I can remember the one I saw when I was in Pine Top, and that baby is in the hospital coughing continuously for like 3 weeks. And they are miserable. And it just doesn't let up. And it's amazing, and you wonder how they can even survive this. And obviously, some can't.
And it's a highly effective vaccine to prevent that.
Yes. There's always going to be an outlier somewhere, right? But
sure.
I would think that all those children that catch it, or how about the one in Texas where the child died and the parents are still anti-vax? They were interviewed afterwards, and I think that so that most people, if you got through it and were, that's a big deal. Your wife's a pediatrician, yeah. And a big part of her practice is getting kids immunized, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And she's said again and again. She has said basically what you said. It's the single most important advancement in human history, in human existence.
I totally. I don't think there would be any feeling of comfort or protection or safety if you had all those diseases running around, because you'd be afraid that the next person you came in contact with might give you one of them. And so think of the way we would have evolved if that hadn't have come into play.
Can you talk a little bit about the concept of herd immunity and how it works?
Herd immunity is basically that. It's that the more of the population that is immunized, the less chance that virus has to maintain itself by jumping from one victim to the next, from one person to the next. And so that if there's a small pocket of this virus over here, it's going to burn itself out and disappear if there's nowhere for it to go. The herd immunity is if you need to get a certain percentage of the population immunized so that disease or that virus cannot freely travel through there and go from one to the next to the next. If they go from one to one and then come up against someone who is immunized, then they're not going to get it and then spread it to somebody else. It stops there.
There are certain people, those with compromised immune systems, who are not candidates for vaccination, correct?
Yes, particularly some of those, there are live vaccines, and then there are dead vaccines.
Yeah, the
basically.
attenuated ones, right?
Yes, and so that's it's just like with pregnancy, is that there's a lot of things we can't give, like the MMR, because of the potential of harm to the patient, because it's a live vaccine.
And now and then I see these news stories where, doctors or people are trying to speak with those who say, well, I'm not going to take any vaccines. And the position is, hey, herd immunity, protect your kids, protect everyone. And the response, as I've seen in some of these chats, is, it's about me. I'm not going to do anything for anybody else.
That's rather discouraging, isn't it? But that is not, you can't really appeal to them that way. You literally have to appeal to them on how that might affect them or not. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating for sure to deal with nobody's trying to be better than anybody else here. Nobody is trying to be superior to anybody else here. We're just trying to disperse enough information to try to influence or change people's minds about what is good. No, it's good for them and their family. That'd be a better approach than a way more effective approach than herd immunity. Yeah. Yes, you're helping the population by this, but you're also helping yourself.
Have you ever seen misinformation, disinformation at a level like it is? Maybe in COVID, right?
Yeah, COVID is still...
It set the benchmark.
It did, and it's so... it was... there were a lot of mistakes, but there were... Again, it was... for them to literally develop the vaccine in a year, people don't argue that it had a very positive effect on... Well, most people don't argue that. It had a very positive effect, but I think they got in a year, and some of them take years and years and years to get from whatever. They have to isolate the virus, and they have to figure out how you could develop something that would be able for you to produce antibodies. They take a long time. I heard this once that it's a little different, but the rotavirus for the vaccine for infectious diarrhea in young kids, they started it and stopped it and it took like 20-something years to get it finally refined, safe, approved.
When the COVID vaccine came out and it was that fast, did you personally have any misgivings about it?
I did not, because I'm in a practice where, I probably had it and don't know it. But we were exposed to people all the way, and back then when you couldn't diagnose it very fast, we would sit there and have somebody come in active labor, or see them in the office even. They weren't febrile or anything yet, or maybe they'd gotten over that. And so we're totally exposed. And I believe I got that vaccine on December 23rd. And with it came a certain percentage of protectiveness. Obviously, you're going to get more when you had the second one. No, I was happy. I did this. I looked up. I just took up a few little notes here, but they started getting like the polio. They got in like 52, who Jonas Salk. Then they went a little bit farther and they developed an oral one for that. And then they just started getting them. But I mentioned that pneumococcus. That was in 1978. They started knocking off some of these viruses earlier, like in the 60s, for measles, mumps, and rubella. So they got them together, but they got the three of them they got done in the 60s, and so the MMR has remained. And poor MMR that then comes under attack and from the good Dr. Wakefield. But so that's been the work. But it looks like, something like that, the two big ones that we saw were, it looks like the pneumococcal was in 78, and then the H flu, which that little baby I saw, and saw a lot of other people with it, it didn't get done till, let's say, 1985.
So in the late 70s, mid 80s, when those vaccines first came out, do you remember people saying, I don't know if I want to get that, or that sentiment hadn't really spread?
I don't think that, there's always been that doubt and everything, but I think most mothers were they were very positively responsive to this, and there wasn't as much doubt about the science or the other motivation as there is today. And so I don't remember getting in too many. It was probably a rarity for someone to come in and bring their child and refuse to have them vaccinated. Sort of an interesting thing has evolved, and I don't know if your wife does this or not, but some pediatricians evolved to the point that they would not see kids that weren't vaccinated because they didn't want somebody to come in and infect somebody in their waiting room or something.
Yeah, she has not. She's told me that exists in places. Her feeling is those patients need her. That's like, I get the argument, right? But if that patient's parents already won't get the patient vaccinated, she has to do whatever she can to help. I think that's her perspective on it.
I totally agree with that. You can't. In the practice of medicine, you have to process and deal with your own reactive feelings and emotions about things. But in the end, when I heard that, I thought that seemed a little punitive to me, to refuse to, we don't. And I've sort of learned over the decades that, something we as practitioners, we, do the best with what we have. And if we have somebody that doesn't agree with this or doesn't do that, I'm still going to take care of them the best I can. And
that is Dr. Ken Jackson. He is a family doc practicing OB at Kingman OB-GYN Associates. Dr. Jackson, thank you as always. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Always a pleasure to talk with you. Always.
And that is another edition of Focus on Your Health. I'm TG LaFredo. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.